Welcome to Recognizing and Reporting Child Abuse, Mandated and Permissive Reporting in Pennsylvania. Copyright 2024, The University of Pittsburgh. This material is copyrighted by the University of Pittsburgh. It may be used freely for training and other educational purposes by public child welfare agencies and other not-for-profit child welfare agencies that properly attribute all material use to the University of Pittsburgh. No sale, use for training for fees, or any other commercial use of this material in whole or in part is permitted without the express written permission of the Pennsylvania Child Welfare Resource Center of the School of Social Work at the University of Pittsburgh. Please contact the Resource Center at 717-795-9048 for further information or permissions. All names and identities used in this module are fictitious. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is coincidental. Section 1. Introduction. The Child Protective Services Law, CPSL, reporting training is made possible by the University of Pittsburgh, the Department of Human Services, Office of Children, Youth and Families, the Pennsylvania Children and Youth Administrators, and funding from the Children's Justice Act. Section 1. Introduction. Section 2. Defining child abuse. Section 3. Potential indicators of abuse. Section 4. Determining reasonable cause to suspect. Section 5. The effects of child abuse and why to report. Section 6. Reporting child abuse. Section 7. Reporter rights and responsibilities. Section 8. After you report. Section 9. How to submit a referral electronically through the Child Welfare Portal. Section 10. Wrap-up. Key terms. A glossary. As you move through the information presented here, important terms will be introduced and defined. Throughout the course, select any bold and underlined term to review the term's definition in the course glossary. Many terms will first be italicized and defined on the slide and then linked to the glossary for your reference. Select the glossary button to visit the glossary now. References to the law. Throughout the course, information regarding the Child Protective Services Law, CPSL, and other related laws will be introduced. Each side that references the law will display the law icon above. Select the law icon to access the law related to the information found on the slide. Course learning objectives. By the end of this course, you will be able to identify the infrastructure for protecting children from abuse in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Identify the legal definition of child abuse according to Pennsylvania's Child Protective Services Law. Recognize potential indicators of child abuse. Determine when to report suspected child abuse. Recognize the effect of trauma on children who have been abused. Recognize how disproportionately and disparity affect the reporting of child abuse. Course learning objectives continued. By the end of this course, you will be able to describe the roles, rights, and responsibilities of mandated and permissive reporters of suspected child abuse. Recognize mandated reporter protections as well as consequences for failure to report. Identify the process that follows after a report is made. Understand the roles and responsibilities of the county agency once a report is received. Define the process for reporting suspected child abuse. Section 1. Learning objective. Identify the infrastructure for protecting children from abuse in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Section 1. outlines the course and provides information on Pennsylvania's child welfare system and the processes it undertakes to ensure the safety and well-being of Pennsylvania's children. Scenario. Before we begin, consider this scenario. Tristan is an active 4-year-old boy. He often arrives at his daycare center with bumps and bruises. Today, he arrived with welts and blisters on the back of his legs that resemble the shape of a strap or belt. When the daycare provider asked Tristan what happened, he didn't answer the question, but said his daddy was mad at him. The daycare provider considers whether Tristan would have received welts and blisters on the back of his legs while playing. What should the daycare provider do? Oh boy. Please select the statement that best describes your feelings about the question. What should the daycare provider do? I suppose it wouldn't be out of the question to do that. I mean, I know exactly what the daycare provider should do according to Pennsylvania law. I'm not quite sure what the daycare provider should do, or I have no idea what the daycare provider should do. Pennsylvania's public child welfare system. Pennsylvania's child welfare system is state supervised and county administered. The Department of Human Services, formerly the Department of Public Welfare, and the Office of Children, Youth, and Families support Pennsylvania's children and families through a comprehensive variety of services. Please select each button for more information. Which one was this? Sorry. The Department of Human Services. Our vision is to see Pennsylvanians living safe, healthy, and independent lives. Our mission is to improve the quality of life for Pennsylvania's individuals and families. We promote opportunities for independence through services and supports while demonstrating accountability for taxpayer resources. Office of Children, Youth, and Families. Vision. All children and youth grow up in a safe, loving, nurturing, permanent family and community. Mission. We support the provision of quality services and best practices designed to ensure the safety, permanency, and well-being of Pennsylvania's children, youth, and families. Office of Children, Youth, and Families. The Office of Children, Youth, and Families, OCYF, is organized into 4 bureaus, supervising and supporting the work of Pennsylvania's county children and youth agencies, CCYA. Select each button to visit the bureau websites for more information on the specific services and the support each bureau provides. And let's see here. Not on the screen, but the Bureau of Child and Family Services is primarily responsible for monitoring the delivery of services by county and private children and youth social service agencies, including foster care agencies, adoption agencies, residential and supervised independent living facilities throughout the Commonwealth. Bureau of Juvenile Justice Services. The Bureau of Juvenile Justice Services is responsible for the management, operations, program planning, and oversight of all of the Youth Development Center/Youth Forestry Camp facilities. These facilities are designed to provide state-of-the-art treatment, care, and custody services to Pennsylvania's most at-risk youth. Bureau of Policy, Programs, and Operations. The Bureau of Policy, Programs, and Operations consists of 4 divisions that are responsible for planning, developing, and implementing new and revised regulations and statutes relevant to child welfare in Pennsylvania, providing policy and regulatory clarifications, providing analysis of and recommendations for proposed legislation, developing reports and publications, overseeing and managing special grants, including the statewide Adoption and Permanency Network, and the Chaffee Foster Care Independence Program. Bureau of Budget and Fiscal Support. Working in conjunction with the Bureau of Policy, Programs, and Operations, the Bureau of Children and Family Services, the Bureau of Budget and Fiscal Support, provides leadership to counties related to budget and invoice process for federal and state funds, establishes and implements fiscal policy, and provides oversight of federal audits and state title IV-E. I don't know what that is. Roman. Quality assurance reviews. Childline, unit within the Bureau of Policy, Programs, and Operations. Childline is Pennsylvania's hotline for reporting suspected child abuse. Childline at 1-800-932-0313. Childline's mission is to improve safety of children within the Commonwealth by receiving and transmitting suspected reports of abuse and neglect 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Childline is a statewide toll-free number available for all persons, whether mandated by law or not, to use to report cases of suspected child abuse or children allegedly in need of general protective services. Childline refers reports of suspected child abuse and neglect to appropriate investigating agencies to ensure the safety and well-being of the children in Pennsylvania. Allegedly, represented as existing or as being as described, but not so proved, supposedly. Services for children, youth, and families. Child welfare services are state-supervised but organized, managed, and delivered by county children and youth agencies. A responsibility at the state and local level is to create and implement child abuse prevention initiatives, as well as to provide intervention services to families as appropriate in abuse and non-abuse cases. While intervention services are provided, the County Children and Youth Agency is responsible for delivering services and activities designed to prevent further child abuse and neglect, and to provide appropriate services to help strengthen and unite families whenever possible. A child is defined as an individual under 18 years of age. Neglect is the failure of a parent or other person with responsibility for the child to provide needed food, clothing, shelter, medical care, or supervision to the degree that the child's health, safety, and well-being are threatened with harm. Sorry, I just got a text. Okay. Services for children, youth, and families. County children and youth agencies are also responsible for investigating suspected child abuse, accessing the need for general protective services. These are defined further in the next few slides. County agencies provide 2 categories of services. Child protective services. Those services and activities provided by the Department of Human Services and each county agency for child abuse cases. General protective services those services and activities provided by each county agency for cases requiring protective services as defined by the department in regulations. Always report suspected harm to a child. Pennsylvania provides needed services and support both for cases of child abuse or neglect and for cases of non-abuse that require support and assistance. Child welfare professionals who receive your report will determine the type of assistance needed. Child Protective Services, CPS. CPS cases must rise to the level of child abuse as per the Child Protective Services law. Require investigation. Select the button and review the criteria for child abuse and more about investigations now. The term child abuse shall mean intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly doing any of the following. 1. Causing bodily injury to a child through any recent act or failure to act. Fabricating, I don't know what that word is. Or intentionally exaggerating or inducing a medical symptom or disease which results in a potentially harmful medical evaluation or treatment to the child through any recent act. Causing or substantially contributing to serious mental injury to a child through any act or failure to act as a series of such acts or failures to act. Mental injury to a child or a series. Okay. Causing sexual abuse or exploitation of a child through any act or failure to act. Creating a reasonable likelihood of bodily injury to a child through any recent act or failure to act. Creating a likelihood of sexual abuse or exploitation of a child through any recent act or failure to act. Causing serious physical neglect of a child. Engaging in any of the following recent acts: kicking, biting, throwing, burning, stabbing, or cutting a child in a manner that endangers the child. Unreasonably restraining or confining a child based on consideration of the method, location, or the duration of restraint or confinement. Forcefully shaking a child under 1 year of age. Forcefully slapping or otherwise striking a child under 1 year of age. Interfering with the breathing of a child. Causing a child to be present at a location while a violation relating to the operation of methamphetamine laboratory is occurring, provided that the violation is being investigated by law enforcement. Leaving a child unsupervised with an individual other than the child's parent, who the actor knows or reasonably should have known, is required to register as a Tier 2 or Tier 3 sexual offender under Pennsylvania that relating to registration of sexual offenders, where the victim of sexual offense was under 18 years of age when the crime was committed. Has been determined to be a sexually violent predator under relating to assessments, or any of its predecessors. Has been determined to be a sexually violent delinquent child as defined in the relating to definitions. Has been determined to be a sexually violent predator under relating to assessments, or has to register for life under relating to registration. Causing the death of a child through any act or failure to act. Engaging a child in a severe form of trafficking in persons or sex trafficking, as those terms are defined under Section 103 of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. Restatement of culpability Conduct that causes injury or harm to a child or creates a risk of injury or harm to a child shall not be considered child abuse if there is no evidence that the person acted intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly when causing the injury or harm to the child or creating a risk of injury or harm to the child. Child abuse exclusions. The term child abuse does not include any conduct for which an exclusion is provided in Section 6304, relating to exclusions from child abuse. Investigation. An investigation under this section shall include the following: a determination of the safety of or risk of harm to the child or any other child if each child continues to remain in the existing home environment. A determination of the nature, extent, and cause of any condition listed in the report. Any action necessary to provide for the safety of the child or any other child in the child's household. The taking of photographic identification of the child or any other child in the child's household, which shall be maintained in the case file. Communication with the Department Service under Section 6332. Example: a 6-year-old child arrives at an emergency room with burns on the back of her legs and bruises on her buttocks. The mother is unable to provide an explanation for the injuries. General Protective Services. The primary purpose of GPS is to protect the rights and welfare of children so that they have an opportunity for healthy growth and development. Supports GPS cases, supports and the services provided when protective services are required in non-abuse cases or those cases that do not rise to the level of child abuse, as per the Child Protective Services Law. Example: a mother of 4 children, all under the age of 6, is residing in a shelter and feeling overwhelmed with the responsibilities of caring for her children. She has been known to leave the children unattended in the shelter. General Protective Services. General Protective Services are services designed to prevent the potential for harm to a child who meets one of the following conditions: is without proper parental care or control, substance, education, as required by law, or other care or control necessary for his physical, mental, or emotional health or morals, has been placed for care or adoption in violation of law, has been abandoned by his parents, guardian, or other custodian, is without a parent, guardian, or legal custodian, is habitually and without justification truant from school while subject to compulsory school attendance. General Protective Services are services designed to prevent the potential harm to a child who meets one of the following conditions: has committed a specific act of habitual disobedience of the reasonable and lawful commands of his parent, guardian, or other custodian, and who is ungovernable and found to be in need of care, treatment, or supervision, is under 10 years of age and has committed a delinquent act, has been formally educated dependent under Section 6341 of the Juvenile Act relating to educations, and is under the jurisdiction of the court, subject to its conditions or placements, and whom commits an act which is defined as ungovernable in subparagraph, has been referred under Section 6323 of the Juvenile Act relating to informal adjustment, and who commits an act which is defined as ungovernable in subparagraph. Protecting children from abuse and neglect, a community responsibility. Protecting Pennsylvania's children from abuse and neglect is a shared responsibility that does not solely rest with the formal Children Protective Services system. Moreover, it requires the collective collaboration of community partners and Pennsylvania citizens to provide local safety nets for our children and families that are facing challenges within our communities and neighborhoods. Child abuse and neglect in Pennsylvania. Select the button to learn more about the number of children who have been abused or neglected in the Commonwealth. No, it's just a bunch of data. Okay. Motivation for change, 1 of 3. Across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, high-profile cases of child abuse in 2012 resulted in increased public awareness of child abuse and prompted a re-examination of the laws protecting children. The Pennsylvania General Assembly convened the Pennsylvania Task Force on Child Protection to thoroughly review state laws and procedures governing child protection and the reporting of child abuse. Motivation for change, 2 of 3. The task force produced its final report in November of 2012. The report included recommended amendments to the Child Protective Services Law and other statutes. The primary and driving principle of these amendments is to afford children greater protection from abuse. Motivation for change, 3 of 3. Following receipt of the task force's report and recommendations, a bipartisan group of legislators from the House and Senate collaborated to draft a series of bills amending several components of the Child Protective Services Law and other statutes. The legislator passed a series of bills incorporating the input of public and private stakeholders and advocates and implementing many of the task force's recommendations. Statutory amendments. Types of change. This motivation for change resulted in significant modifications to definitions, timeframes, procedures in the CPSL and other statutes. More about child welfare in PA. The 2023 State of Child Welfare in Pennsylvania, Strengthening the Child Welfare System for Children, Youth, and Families report includes important information related to this training. Please take time to read the first section, Structure of Pennsylvania's Child Welfare System, pages 3-5, prior to proceeding by selecting the button. Structure of Pennsylvania's Child Welfare System. The purpose of the child welfare system is to investigate allegations of child abuse and neglect, make determinations on the validity of reports, and provide in-home and community-based services to stabilize families and keep them intact. However, if a placement is necessary, the system should ensure that children and youth are placed in a family-based setting or a treatment program in a time-limited capacity to meet specialized needs. All states must have a child welfare system, but operate differently to serve children, youth, and families. There are 3 types of child welfare systems: state-administered, a centralized state-provided system; county-administered. Each county operates independently but is supervised by a state entity; hybrid, a system administered partially by the state and by the counties. Pennsylvania is a county-administered, state-supervised child welfare system. The Office of Children, Youth, and Families supervises the 67 independently operated county child welfare agencies, mandated and permissive reporters. disclose child abuse and neglect allegations by verbally or electronically providing information to Childline, the state's toll-free reporting hotline. Childline then determines the category of investigation and transmits the information to the appropriate county child welfare agency for investigation. These are defined by either a Child Protective Services report or a General Protective Services report. Pennsylvania is somewhat unique in having differentiation in reports, whereas other states have only one designation of reports. CPS reports, defined by the Child Protective Services law, include reports of abuse such as physical, sexual, and serious physical neglect, among others. A case may also be determined as pending, meaning that the information may take longer to come to a final determination. The County Child Welfare Agency most often investigates CPS reports, but certain reports are also investigated by OCYF, regional office staff. GPS reports have less severe findings, often focused on indications of neglect, and can include parental substance use disorders, truancy, and homelessness, among others. It is also the goal of the Child Welfare Agency to provide services to families to assist with stabilization, decrease risk factors for ongoing abuse or neglect, meet specific treatment needs, or support placements in out-of-home care. Services can be commonly community-based, in which there is no formal oversight or contracting by the County Child Welfare Agency, and can be either preventative or on an intervention basis. Similarly, and more often, county agencies contract with providers to offer comprehensive services. Whichever service the county provides, community or in-home support, is a critical practice that child welfare agencies deliver. If a child cannot safely remain in their biological home, placement outside the home into a foster care setting is the next option. Preferably, children should stay in their homes and community with supportive services to ensure their safety and mitigate ongoing risks. However, when this cannot occur, children and youth should have the first option of being placed with kin or someone they know, trust, or with whom they have significant supportive relationship. Kin do not have to be blood related and can be a teacher, counselor, family friend, or someone the child or family identifies as support. Only when kin placement is ruled out should a child be placed in a higher level of care, such as foster care. Congregate care settings, such as group homes or residential placements, must be the last option and should only be utilized to meet specialized, time-limited treatment needs. Once a child is in out-of-home placement, in most cases, every effort should be made to reunify them safely and quickly with their biological parents. A concurrent plan is needed to determine the next permanency option if reunification is unsuccessful. The goal should account for what is in the child's best interest and with their input if age appropriate. Other permanency options include adoption or permanent legal custodianship. If the goal of last resort is another planned permanent living arrangement, which means that a child will likely exit care to a non-permanent option, this leaves children and youth without legal permanent connections and families. Would you like to know more about CPSL? To learn more about Pennsylvania's efforts to protect children, select the button. The Department of Human Services Office of Children, Youth, and Families vision is for all children and youth to grow up in a safe, nurturing, and permanent family and community. Our mission is to support the provision of quality services and best practices designed to ensure the safety, permanency, and well-being of Pennsylvania's children, youth, and families. Section 2. Defining child abuse. Review and preview. Section 1 introduced this course on reporting child abuse in Pennsylvania and reviewed the Commonwealth Child Welfare System. Section 2 will explain child abuse as defined in Pennsylvania's Child Protective Services Law. Section 2. Learning Objective. Identify the legal definition of child abuse according to Pennsylvania's Child Protective Services Law. Section 2. Components of the child abuse and types of child abuse. The three components of child abuse are a child, an act or failure to act, and a perpetrator. There are three primary components of child abuse: a child, an act or failure to act, and a perpetrator. Definition: child. As you may recall, the Child Protective Services Law defines a child as an individual under 18 years of age. Definition: act. The CPSL considers both an act of harm to a child and the failure to act to prevent harm to a child when defining an act of child abuse. An act is something that is done to harm or cause potential harm to a child. A failure to act is something that is not done to prevent harm or potential harm to a child. A recent act or failure to act is any act committed within 2 years of the date of the report to Department of Human Services or county agency. Definition: perpetrator, 1 of 5. The relationship is a factor in defining perpetrators. A perpetrator can be a parent of the legal child, biological parent, adoptive parent, or legal guardian, a spouse or former spouse of the child's parent, a paramour or formal paramour of the child's parent, a person who is engaged in an ongoing intimate relationship with a parent of the child but is not married to and does not necessarily reside with the child's parent. A person 14 years of age or older who does not reside in the same house as the child and is responsible for the child's welfare or having direct contact with children, as an employee or child care services, a school, or through a program, activity, or service. An individual 14 years of age or older who resides in the same home as a child. Notes on definitions. *1. Direct contact with children is the care, supervision, guidance, or control of children, or routine interaction with children. *2. Routine interaction is the regular and repeated contact that is integral to a person's employment or volunteer responsibilities. Definition: perpetrator, 2 of 5. The relationship is a factor in defining perpetrators. A perpetrator can be an individual 18 years of age or older who does not reside in the same home as the child, but is related within the third degree of consanguinity or affinity by birth or adoption to the child. An individual 18 years of age or older who engages a child in severe forms of trafficking in persons or sex trafficking, as those terms are defined under Section 103 of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. Affinity by birth or adoption is a bond that exists between two or more people as a result of someone's relationship. It is the relationship each party has to the blood relations of the other partner. Definition: perpetrator. When the abuse involves a failure to act, only the following can happen. only the following can be identified as a perpetrator: a parent of the child, a spouse or former spouse of the child's parent, a paramour or former paramour of the child's parent, a person 18 years of age or older and responsible for the child's welfare, a person 18 years of age or older who resides in the same home as the child. Definition: perpetrator, 4 of 5. Unknown and multiple. The CPSL also allows for child abuse to be indicated when the identity of a perpetrator is unknown. If substantial evidence of abuse by a perpetrator exists, but the department or county agency is unable to identify the specific perpetrator, the CPSL also permits the identification of multiple perpetrators when there is substantial evidence against each perpetrator named. Definition: perpetrator, 5 of 5. Remember, even if you don't know who the perpetrator is, report to Childline. A reporter is not required to provide the identity of an alleged perpetrator if it is unknown to the reporter. A reporter is not required to determine whether a person meets one of the previously referenced categories of perpetrator. What is child abuse? Now that you have learned about the 3 components of child abuse, let's define what constitutes child abuse in Pennsylvania. What is child abuse? Continued. What does the law say? The legal definition of child abuse begins with intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly. What does it mean? The CPSL places responsibility on the individual who did something to cause harm or endanger a child, either intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly. Select each button for the definitions. Intentionally. Done with direct purpose of causing the type of harm that resulted. Knowingly. Awareness that harm is practically certain to result. Recklessly. Conscious disregard of substantial and unjustifiable risk. Child abuse, bodily injury. What does the CPSL say? Causing bodily injury to a child through any recent act or failure to act. Remember, a recent act or failure to act is any act to act committed within 2 years of the date of the report to the department or county agency. What does it mean? The CPSL considers 2 parameters, substantial pain or impairment, when describing bodily injury, which are further explored next. Child abuse, bodily injury continued. How much pain? If the child experiences what a reasonable person believes to be substantial pain. Or, how impaired? If, due to the injury, the child's ability to function is reduced in any way other than temporarily or permanently. Either temporarily or permanently. Child abuse, likelihood of bodily injury. What does the CPSL say? In addition to causing a bodily injury, creating reasonable likelihood of bodily injury to a child through any recent act or failure to act is also a type of child abuse. What does it mean? Bodily injury does not have to occur. The individual's behavior creates a very good chance of abuse occurring to a child. Child abuse, fabricating, exaggerating, or inducing a medical symptom or disease. What does the CPSL say? Fabricating, feigning, or intentionally exaggerating or inducing a medical symptom or disease which results in potentially harmful medical evaluation or treatment to the child through any recent act. What does it mean? to make up fake or cause an illness to a child that results in a potentially harmful medical treatment or evaluation. Child abuse, serious mental injury. What does the CPSL say? Causing or substantially contributing to serious mental injury to a child through any act or failure to act, or a series of such acts or failures to act. What does it mean? Let's look at the criteria that help to describe what serious mental injury means. What is serious mental injury? A psychological condition that is diagnosed by a doctor or licensed psychologist, including the refusal of appropriate treatment that causes the child to be chronically and severely anxious, agitated, depressed, socially withdrawn, psychotic, or in reasonable fear for life or safety, or seriously interferes with a child's ability to achieve age-appropriate developmental and social tasks. Child abuse, sexual abuse or exploitation. What does the CPSL say? Causing sexual abuse or exploitation of a child through any act or failure to act. What does it mean? The employment, use, persuasion, inducement, enticement, or coercion of a child to engage in or to assist another individual to engage in sexually explicit conduct, including, but not limited to, any of the items on the following slides. What is sexual abuse or exploitation? One of three. Looking at the sexual or other intimate parts of a child or other individuals for purpose of sexual stimulation or gratification of any individual. Participating in any sexually explicit conversations, either in person, by telephone, or by a computer-aided device for the purpose of sexual stimulation or gratification of any individual. Actual or simulated sexual activity or nudity for the purpose of sexual stimulation or gratification of any individual. Actual or simulated sexual activity for the purpose of actual or simulated sexual activity for the purpose of producing visual depictions, including photographing, videotaping, computer depicting, or filming. The above does not include consensual activities between a child who is 14 years of age and older and another person who is 14 years of age and older whose age is within 4 years of the child's age. Something does not have to be a physical act with physical contact to be sexual abuse or exploitation. Activities such as talking about, pretending, demonstrating, depicting, or modeling would all be considered sexual acts. What is sexual abuse or exploitation? The CPSL provides a list of criminal offenses that are automatically considered child abuse. Advance to the next slide for this list of criminal offenses. What is sexual abuse or exploitation? 3 of 3. The CPSL defines sexual abuse or exploitation as any of the following when committed against a child. Rape, as defined in Section 18 PA. Statutory sexual assault, as defined in involuntary deviate sexual intercourse, as defined in sexual assault, as defined in institutional sexual assault, as defined in aggravated indecent assault, as defined in indecent assault, as defined in indecent exposure, as defined in incest, as defined in prostitution, as defined in sexual abuse, as defined in unlawful contact with a minor, as defined in sexual exploitation, as defined in Child abuse. Likelihood of sexual abuse or exploitation. What does the CPSL say? Creating a likelihood of sexual abuse or exploitation of a child through any recent act or failure to act. What does it mean? Sexual abuse or exploitation does not have to occur. The individual's behavior creates a very good chance of sexual abuse or exploitation occurring to a child. Child abuse. Serious physical neglect. What does the CPSL say? Causing serious physical neglect of a child. What does it mean? Any of the following when committed by a perpetrator that endangers a child's life or health, threatens a child's well-being, causes bodily injury, or impairs a child's health, development, or functioning due to a repeated, prolonged, or egregious failure to supervise a child, considering the child's developmental age and abilities. Failing to provide a child with adequate essential food, clothing, shelter, or medical care. Child abuse. Additional specific recent acts, 1 of 6. What does the CPSL say? The CPSL lists certain recent acts that are considered child abuse whenever they are done in a manner that endangers the child. These recent per se acts are considered child abuse in and of themselves: kicking, biting, throwing, burning, stabbing, or cutting a child in a manner that endangers the child. Child abuse. Additional specific recent acts, 2 of 6. What does the CPSL say? The law lists certain recent acts that are considered child abuse even if they do not result in harm to a child. These recent per se acts are considered child abuse in and of themselves: unreasonably restraining or confining a child based on consideration of the method, location, or the duration of a restraint or confinement. Forcefully shaking a child under 1 year of age. Forcefully slapping or striking a child under 1 year of age. Interfering with the breathing of a child. Child abuse. Additional specific recent acts, 3 of 6. What does the CPSL say? The CPSL lists certain recent acts that are considered child abuse even if they do not result in harm to a child. These per se acts are considered child abuse and in and of themselves: causing a child to be present at a methamphetamine laboratory that is investigated by law enforcement. Child abuse. Additional specific recent acts, 4 of 6. What does the CPSL say? The CPSL lists certain recent acts that are considered child abuse even if they do not result in harm to a child. These recent per se acts are considered child abuse in and of themselves: leaving a child unsupervised with an individual other than the child's parent who the actor knows or reasonably should have known the individual is a Tier 2 or Tier 3 sexual offender where the victim of the sexual offense was under 18 years of age when the crime was committed. Has been determined to be a sexually violent predator under or any of its predecessors. Has been determined to be a sexually violent delinquent child. Has been determined to be a sexually violent predator or has to register for life. Crime is a violation of a law in which there is injury to the public or a member of the public and a term in jail or prison and/or fine as possible penalties. Child abuse. Additional specific recent acts, 5 of 6. Causing the death of a child. What does the CPSL say? Causing the death of a child through any act or failure to act. Child abuse. Additional specific recent acts, 6 of 6. Engaging in sex trafficking. What does the CPSL say? Engaging a child in a severe form of trafficking in persons or sex trafficking as defined by the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. Human trafficking. Federal and state laws. What is human trafficking? Human trafficking is also known as severe forms of trafficking in persons. The term severe forms of trafficking in persons means A. Sex trafficking in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such act has not attained 18 years of age, or B. The recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of subjection to voluntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. Peonage, paying off debt through work. Debt bondage, debt slavery, bonded labor, or services for a debt or other obligation. Slavery, a condition compared to that of a slave in respect of exhausting labor or restricted freedom. What is labor trafficking? Labor trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. Labor trafficking includes, but is not limited to, forcing an individual to work for little pay or no pay, domestic servitude, and involuntary servitude. Domestic servitude is providing services within a household for 10 to 16 hours per day, such as, but not limited to, childcare, cooking, cleaning, yard work, gardening, etc. Involuntary servitude is intended to cause the person to believe that they must cooperate, or they or someone else will suffer serious harm, physical restraint, or the abuse or threatened abuse of the legal process. Children, youth, and adults can all be victims of labor trafficking. What is sex trafficking? Sex trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of a commercial sex act. A severe form of sex trafficking is when the victim is under the age of 18. Sex trafficking is not limited to forced or pimp-controlled prostitution. A child involved in survival sex is a victim of sex trafficking. The purchaser of sex from a child is obtaining that child for sex and is a trafficker. What is a commercial sex act? Any sex act on account of which anything of value is given to or received by any person. Section 3. Potential indicators of abuse. Review and preview. Section 2. Explained child abuse as defined according to Pennsylvania's Child Protective Services Law. Section 3. Discuss potential indicators of child abuse. Section 3. Learning objective. Recognize potential indicators of child abuse. Section 3. The physical and behavioral indicators of child abuse in children. The behavioral indicators in an adult. Indicators. Research has identified both physical and behavioral indicators for both children who are abused and those who abuse them. Next, you will explore those indicators in areas of bodily injury, sexual abuse or exploitation, serious mental injury, and serious physical neglect. Categories of child abuse. Let's examine the categories of child abuse to identify indicators. They are: causing bodily injury to a child through any recent act or failure to act, fabricating, feigning, or intentionally exaggerating or inducing a medical symptom or disease which results in a potentially harmful medical evaluation or treatment to the child, though through any recent act. Causing or substantially contributing to serious mental injury to a child through any act or failure to act, or a series of such acts or failures to act. Causing sexual abuse or exploitation of a child through any act or failure to act. Creating a reasonable likelihood of bodily injury to a child through any recent act or failure to act. Creating a likelihood of sexual abuse or exploitation of a child through any recent act or failure to act. Causing serious physical neglect of a child. Engaging in a specific recent per se act. Causing the death of a child through any act or failure to act. Engaging a child in a severe form of trafficking in persons or sex trafficking. Child indicators, signs of bodily injury. The physical signs of abuse include bruises, burns, or broken bones. However, not all abuse, even physical or sexual abuse, is apparent. There are also behavioral indicators that may indicate that child abuse has occurred. Many of these indicators may also occur in children who have not been abused and may not be seen in children who have been abused. Child indicators, signs of bodily injury. Fear of going home, fear of parent or caregiver, extreme apprehensiveness/vigilance, pronounced aggression or passivity, flinches easily or avoids being touched. Play includes abusive talk or behavior, unexplained injuries, unbelievable or inconsistent explanations of injuries, injuries inconsistent with a child's age/developmental level, unable to recall how injuries occurred or account of injuries is inconsistent with the nature of the injuries, multiple bruises in various stages of healing, bruises located on face, ears, neck, buttocks, back, chest, thighs, back of legs, and genitalia. Bruises that resemble objects such as a hand, fist, belt buckle, or rope. Burns. Child indicators, signs of sexual abuse or exploitation. Both physical and behavioral indicators are often observed with children who have been sexually abused. Remember, these indicators are red flags and may be due to unrelated circumstances and conditions. Many of these indicators may occur in children who have not been abused and may not be seen in children who have been abused. Child indicators, signs of sexual abuse or exploitation. Sexually promiscuous. Developmental age-inappropriate sexual play and or drawings. Cruelty to others. Cruelty to animals. Fire settings. Anxious. Withdrawn. Sleep disturbances. Bedwetting. Pain or irritation in genital/anal area. Difficulty walking or sitting. Difficulty urinating. Pregnancy. Positive testing for sexually transmitted diseases. Excessive or injurious masturbation. Child indicators, signs of serious mental injury. In addition to the behavioral/emotional reactions to mental abuse, there are physical indicators as well. Remember, these indicators are red flags and may be due to unrelated circumstances and conditions. Many of these indicators may occur in children who have not been abused and may not be seen in children who have been abused. Child indicators, signs of serious mental injury, continued. Expressing feelings of inadequacy, fearful of trying new things, overly compliant, poor peer relationships, excessive dependence on adults, habit disorders, eating disorders, frequent psychosomatic complaints, bedwetting, self-harm, speech disorders. Child indicators, serious physical neglect. Advance to the next slide for a list of potential indicators of neglect. Remember, these indicators are red flags and may be due to unrelated circumstances and conditions, including poverty. Child indicators, signs of serious physical neglect. Not registered in school, inadequate or inappropriate supervision, poor impulse control, frequently fatigued, parentified behaviors, lack of adequate medical and dental care, often hungry, lack of shelter, weight is significantly lower than normal for their age and gender, developmental delays, persistent, untreated conditions, exposure to hazards, clothing that is dirty, inappropriate for the weather, too small or too large. The signs of serious physical neglect. Harvard Center on the Developing Child created a video in brief, The Science of Neglect, to describe how neglect impairs children's normal development and contributes to stress in children. Identification and warning signs of human trafficking. The Pennsylvania Department of Human Services has identified warning signs to consider in the identification of children or youth victims of human trafficking. Please select the button for a list of these warning signs. Warning signs can include, but are not limited to, has been verified to be under the age of 18 and is in any way involved in a commercial sex act industry or has a record of prior arrest for prostitution or related charges. Has an explicitly sexual online profile. Excessively frequents internet chat rooms and classified sites. Depicts elements of sexual exploitation in drawing, poetry, or other modes of creative expression. Secrecy about whereabouts, has late nights or unusual hours, is found in a hotel, street track, truck stop, or strip club. Lies about or has no identification or knowledge of personal data, such as, but not limited to, age, name, and/or date of birth. Does not have insurance or control over own finances. Wears clothing that is dirty and inappropriate for the weather. It may be too large or too small. Wears new clothes of any style. Gets hair and or nails done with no financial means. Has multiple cell phones or very expensive items that they have no way of purchasing on their own. Has unaddressed medical issues or goes to the ER or clinic alone with an unrelated adult. Exhibits hypervigilance or paranoid behaviors. In a controlling or dominating relationship. Avoids answering questions and lets someone else speak for them. Expresses interest in or is in relationships with adults or much older adults. Has significant change in behavior, including increased social media and new associates or friends at school. Has frequent or multiple sexually transmitted diseases or pregnancies. Unexplained injuries and/or unbelievable or inconsistent explanations of injuries. Multiple bruises or cuts in various stages of healing. Has a tattoo they're reluctant to explain. Uses specific terms such as trick, the life, or the game. Children and youth at risk populations. 3 of the most common risk factors for child sexual exploitation are involvement with the child welfare system, running away, and child sexual abuse. Also, at high risk are the youth who have experienced emotional or physical abuse, parental substance abuse, difficulties at school, exposure to intimate partner violence, history of exploitation in the family or community neglect, or are LGBTQIA+, in foster or congregate care. Studies show that 70 to 90% of the commercial sexual exploitation of children victims are survivors of child sexual abuse. Children and youth at risk populations. Youth in foster care are sometimes targeted if they lack or have minimal social support and low self-esteem, which may make them easier to prey. According to the National Alliance to End Homelessness, runaway and homeless children are vulnerable to CSEC, commercial sexual exploitation of children, both because of their young age and their circumstances. High numbers of youth who are homeless report having been solicited for prostitution, and pimps have been known to actively target locations where homeless children and youth congregate, including on the streets, at foster care group homes, and at runaway and homeless shelter programs. Scenario. Please read the following scenario and then go to the next slide to identify the presence of any human trafficking risk factors. Tyler was 13 when he found a leftover oxycodone in his parents' medicine cabinet and got high for the first time. Over the next 4 years, he became addicted to drugs, eventually switching to heroin. His adult cousin Dwight, a drug dealer, told Tyler if he wanted to keep getting drugs, he would have to work for it. Tyler ran away from his home and moved in with Dwight, who demanded that Tyler have sex with his customers in return for room, board, and drugs. Dwight told Tyler not to tell their family about what he was doing. When Tyler tried to leave, Dwight threatened him with exposing him to his family and cutting him off drugs. Warning signs can include, but are not limited to, has been verified to be under the age of 18 and is in any way involved in a commercial sex act industry or has a record of prior arrest for prostitution or related charges, has an explicitly sexual online profile, excessively frequents internet chat rooms and classified sites, depicts elements of sexual exploitation in drawing, poetry, or other modes of creative expression, secrecy about whereabouts. Check your understanding. Based on the scenario, select one human trafficking at risk factor for Tyler. Huh? Substance disorders, sure. Having a history of being involved with, no, must be this, yeah. Tyler demonstrates the warning signs of being homeless or a runaway because he left his parents' home. Another warning sign Tyler has is a youth with mental health or substance use disorder. It is important to remember that the list on the previous page is not exhaustive and represents only a selection of possible indicators. Also, the red flags in the list may not be present in all trafficking cases and are not cumulative. It is important to remember that the list on the previous page is not exhaustive and represents only a selection of possible indicators. Also, the red flags in the list may not be present in all trafficking cases and are not cumulative. It is important to remember that the list on the previous page is not exhaustive and represents only a selection of possible indicators. Also, the red flags in the list may not be present in all trafficking cases and are not cumulative. Common behavioral signs that cross categories: physical, sexual, mental, neglect. Signs include withdrawn, exhibiting low self-esteem, poor school performance and attendance, substance use or abuse, attention-seeking, behaviors inappropriate for age, depression. Cause for concern. As you review the information on risk factors and indicators for maltreatment, remember these indicators of possible abuse or neglect. These are not profiles or stereotypes. Behavioral indicators of abuse suggest a child may have suffered maltreatment. These indicators may have causes other than abuse. However, combined with other observations, they may signal cause for concern. Parental/caregiver risk factors. It is important to recognize the complex job of parenting is made more difficult when a parent or caregiver experiences challenges and risk factors such as physical, cognitive, or emotional challenges/disabilities, or more than one of these factors. Parental history of abuse. Own child needs unmet. Lack of knowledge regarding developmental norms. Little parenting experience and lack of or inadequate role models. Substance and/or alcohol abuse. Interpersonal violence. Social isolation. Poverty or lack of opportunities to improve the family's resources. Excess dependency on others. Rigid behavioral expectations for self and others. Having experienced abuse themselves. Experiencing multiple stresses. As a result of these risk factor challenges, parents or caregivers' capacity for healthy relationships with their children can become impaired, which may demonstrate by one or more of the following. In an insecure attachment between parents and caregivers and their children. Lacking steady relationships or routines. Increased anxiety and stress. Unrealistic expectations and demands and accompanying frustration and anger. Challenges in establishing boundaries or structure for children. Inconsistent discipline or inappropriate interactions with children. Erratic behavior and unpredictable moods. Emotional impulsivity. Impaired sense of responsibility. Periods of unemployment and even homelessness. These and other factors can overwhelm parents or caregivers' ability to protect their children from harm and ensure their children's safety and well-being. Adult indicators, signs of abuse. In addition to risk factors, research has identified behavioral indicators for adults who may abuse children. It is important to know that there is not one profile that captures every individual who may abuse or neglect a child. Indicators may or may not be present in instances of child abuse or neglect. The mere presence of an indicator does not mean that abuse is likely, suspected, or present. These indicators will be presented in the following categories: physical abuse, sexual abuse or exploitation, serious mental injury, serious physical neglect. Adult indicators. Physical abuse. There are some behavioral indicators displayed by adults that may be associated with physical abuse of children. May threaten or attempt to injure a child or youth. May shake an infant. May be aggressive towards a child in front of others. May delay medical attention for a child or youth. May be vague about details of the cause of injury, or the details may change. Adult indicators, signs of sexual abuse. There are some behavioral indicators displayed by adults that may be associated with sexual abuse of children. aberrant sexual fantasies, cognitive distortions, and irrational thought patterns that result in antisocial attitudes and beliefs, issues with authority, vulnerability, and neediness, inconsistent and unclear rules and behavioral norms, may be overprotective or controlling of child or youth, may be jealous of child or youth's other relationships, may favor the victim over others. Interactions may be overly physical or have sexual overtones. Adult indicators, signs of mental abuse. Disparaging. Adult indicators, signs of mental abuse. There are some behavioral indicators displayed by adults that may be associated with mental abuse of children. Indifference to the child, withholding of affection and support, blaming, disparaging, and rejecting, such as consistent name-calling or humiliating, lack of emotional security, problems in relationship partner may involve child in the adult relationship issue, mental illness, especially depression, may threaten the child with physical harm, keeps the child home in a subservient role or as a surrogate parent. Adult indicators, signs of mental abuse. There are some behavioral indicators displayed by adults that may be associated with mental abuse of children. Indifference to the child, withholding of affection and support, blaming, disparaging, and rejecting, such as consistent name-calling or humiliating, lack of emotional security, problems in relationship partner may involve child in the adult relationship issue, mental illness, especially depression, may threaten the child with physical harm, keeps the child home in a subservient role or as a surrogate parent. Adult indicators, signs of mental abuse. There are some behavioral indicators displayed by adults that may be associated with mental abuse of children. Indifference to the child, withholding of affection and support, blaming, disparaging, and rejecting, such as consistent name-calling or humiliating, lack of emotional security, problems in relationship partner may involve child in the adult relationship issue, mental illness, especially depression, may threaten the child with physical harm, keeps the child home in a subservient role or as a surrogate parent. Adult indicators, signs of mental abuse. There are some behavioral indicators displayed by adults that may be associated with mental abuse of children. Indifference to the child, withholding of affection and support, blaming, disparaging, and rejecting, such as consistent name-calling or humiliating, lack of emotional security, problems in relationship partner may involve child in the adult relationship issue, mental illness, especially depression, may threaten the child with physical harm, keeps the child home in a subservient role or as a surrogate parent. Adult indicators, signs of neglect. There are some behavioral indicators displayed by adults that may be associated with neglect of children. Emotionally or physically disconnected, understimulating, or absent caregiver. Lack of stable relationships. Struggle to carry out the most basic daily tasks. Limited social contacts/support system. Lack of organizational skills and the capacity to plan. Less able to take pride in their accomplishments. Overwhelmed with own problems. What if I'm not sure it's child abuse? You only need to have reasonable cause to suspect that a child is a victim of abuse. Once a report is received, specially trained child welfare professionals will determine whether the child is a victim of abuse and what action is necessary to ensure a child's safety and well-being. Child abuse is harmful. We know that child abuse is harmful and can have long-lasting effects on its victims. Many children who are abused move on to live happy and fulfilled lives. The incredible resilience that children have allows them to do so. That is why it is so important that we do what we can to recognize when children are experiencing abuse and trauma and report it. Trauma results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening that has long-lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. Would you like to know more about child welfare in PA? To learn more about Pennsylvania's efforts to protect children, select the button. Keep kids safe. The Department of Human Services Office of Children, Youth, and Families' vision is for all children and youth to grow up in a safe, nurturing, and permanent family and community. Our mission is to support the provision of quality services and best practices designed to ensure the safety, permanency, and well-being of Pennsylvania's children, youth, and families. Section 4. Determining reasonable cause to suspect. Section 4. Learning objective. Determine when to report suspected child abuse. Section 4. Feelings, familiarity, observations, circumstances. The Pennsylvania Child Protective Services Law. What is reasonable cause to suspect? The CPSL states that a person only needs to have reasonable cause to suspect a child is a victim of abuse to make a report. Reasonable cause to suspect is more than a hunch. It is a determination you make based on your knowledge of circumstances, your observations, your familiarity with the individuals, and your feelings about the incident. This information will be useful to the child welfare professionals who receive your report. The Pennsylvania Child Protective Services Law, CPSL. What is reasonable cause to suspect? The CPSL states that a person only needs to have reasonable cause to suspect a child is a victim of abuse to make a report. Reasonable cause to suspect is more than a hunch. It is a determination you make based on your knowledge of circumstances, your observations, your familiarity with the individuals, and your feelings about the incident. This information will be useful to the child welfare professionals who receive your report. Circumstances. Identify the facts of the incident or pattern of events. What do you know? Consider your observations about who, what, how, and when. Detailed information about the circumstances will be useful to the professionals who receive your report. Observations. Think about indicators of abuse or red flags present, behavior and demeanor of the child, behavior and demeanor of the adult. Are there any other behaviors or other observations important to notice? Familiarity. Consider the knowledge you have about the individuals, the family situation, relevant history, or similar prior incidents. This information will be useful to the child welfare professionals who receive your report. Feelings. Think about your feelings and personal biases and consider how they influence your conclusions and actions. Biases and stereotypes can impact the reporting of child abuse, which can have a disproportionate impact on certain groups of children and their families. When you report when you suspect, all you need is a reasonable cause to suspect. Information to support your concern may include the circumstances, your observations, your familiarity with the people and the situation, and your feelings and beliefs. The Pennsylvania Child Protective Services Law, CPSL. What is reasonable cause to suspect? The CPSL states that a person only needs to have a reasonable cause to suspect a child is a victim of abuse to make a report. Reasonable cause to suspect is more than a hunch. It is a determination you make based on Section 5. Learning Objectives. Recognize the effect of trauma on children who have been abused. Recognize how disproportionality and disparity affect the reporting of child abuse. Section 5. The effects of child abuse. Disproportionality and disparity. Effects of child abuse. Development and behavior. Child abuse is harmful in many ways and can affect every child differently. Child abuse can have an impact on a child's development and behavior. This impact can depend upon several variables, including, but not limited to, age at onset, duration of abuse, frequency of abuse, relationship to abuser, type of abuse, availability of support, the presence of other non-abusive adults who can provide proper care and nurturance, either in home or in proximity and easily available to the child, can partially mediate the negative effects of abuse. Constitutional factors. The child's personality and temperament can affect the outcomes of abusive treatment. Some children are more resilient than others and have unusual coping strengths. Other children are more vulnerable. Effects of child abuse. Development and behavior. The changes in brain structure and chemical activity caused by child abuse can have a wide variety of effects on children's functioning. Effects of child abuse. Persistent fear response. Children with a persistent fear response may lose their ability to differentiate between danger and safety. They may identify a threat in a non-threatening situation. Effects of child abuse. Hyperarousal. Hyperarousal is when children are exposed to chronic traumatic stress. Their brains create memories that automatically trigger responses without conscious thought. These children may be highly sensitive to nonverbal cues such as eye contact or a touch on the arm, and they may be more likely to misinterpret them. Effects of child abuse. Diminished executive functioning. The brain alterations caused by toxic stress can result in lower academic achievement, intelligent impairment, decreased IQ, and weakened ability to maintain attention. Effects of child abuse. Delayed developmental milestones. Although neglect is often thought of as a failure to meet a child's physical needs for food, shelter, and safety, neglect can also be failure to meet a child's cognitive, emotional, or social needs. For children to master developmental tasks, they need opportunities and encouragement from their caregivers. Child abuse researcher Crosson Tower emphasizes that stereotypes that equate neglect with lower socioeconomic levels also mean that this condition, neglect, is not often diagnosed in the middle and upper class, yet faltering growth spans on socioeconomic levels. Effects of child abuse. Response to positive feedback. Children who have been maltreated may be less responsive to positive feedback because they are used to stress and trauma. Positive feedback is necessary to encourage learning and growth. Effects of child abuse. Complicated social interactions. Toxic stress can result in interactions with others becoming much more difficult. They may find it more challenging to navigate social situations and adapt to changing social contexts. They may perceive threats in safe situations more frequently and react accordingly. And they may have more difficulty interacting with others. Effects of child abuse, trauma. The effects of child abuse may be experienced in the form of trauma. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration recognized the need for a universal definition of trauma that acknowledges its complexities and that each person experiences the same event differently and has different reactions due to their own life experiences and resiliency. SAMHSA reviewed existing research, then developed a shareable trauma concept that is still used today. Individual trauma results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. Effects of child abuse, development, and behavior. The effects of trauma can be long-lasting. A 2019 report from Child Welfare Information Gateway explains that children who experience child abuse and neglect can suffer from the following long-term effects: physical health, chronic health conditions, impaired brain development; psychological, poor emotional health, cognitive difficulties, social difficulties; behavioral, delinquency and criminality, substance abuse, abuse behavior. Effects of child abuse. Early identification. The earlier child abuse is identified, the earlier child welfare professionals can take steps to help children and families minimize the long-term effects. Early detection can also help avoid additional incidents of child abuse and decrease further traumatization. Why does abuse and neglect affect some children profoundly and others to a lesser degree? Recent studies have pointed to the resilience of some children, which is based on a variety of factors. Fortunately, the brain, with its innate plasticity, can repair the effects of early maltreatment to some degree through the use of trauma-informed treatment methods and environments. Child abuse and trauma. There are a variety of ways the trauma of abuse is experienced. We recognize the trauma another person is experiencing through the physical indicators we can see and the behavioral indicators we can experience. To learn more about this topic, please visit the National Child Traumatic Stress Network website. To learn more about the impact of trauma on brain development, please watch the video presented by Georgetown University's Center of Child and Human Development by selecting the button. Disproportionality and disparity. Generally speaking, disproportionality is the over- or underrepresentation of certain groups. In human services, we also talk about disparity. Disparity is a discrepancy, inconsistency, or imbalance of services and outcomes. In child welfare, we consider the experience of children of one race or ethnicity to those of another and find disparities in the likelihood and type of placement, length of stay, and permanency outcomes. Proportionality and disparity in the child welfare system. Please select the video link to define disproportionality and disparity in the context of child welfare. Review Pennsylvania-specific statistics. Reflect on the basis prevalent in our society and how they may impact you as a mandated or permissive reporter. My microphone's not on, silly G. Disproportionality and disparity nationally. Some populations experience overrepresentation in the foster care system. The number in each right column showing youth in the foster care population is larger than the number of the paired left column showing the youth in the national population. Overrepresented groups are more likely to be reported, more likely to be accepted for services, and more likely to be removed from their family. Underrepresentation can also be problematic. If children or families could benefit from services but are not reported, not accepted, and not removed, the children could experience negative outcomes. In Pennsylvania, disproportionality and disparity are even more pronounced for some people than they are at the national level. Please review the 2021 data in the chart. If you would like to review AFCARS data on disproportionality for other states or years, you may do so by selecting the button. Disproportionality and disparity in the reporting process. Cultural awareness and critical thinking are key skills for a community that takes responsibility for the safety and well-being of children. Both require continual self-reflection. While reflecting on the biases and prejudices that lead to disparities can be uncomfortable, it is essential to understanding our collective role in preventing the under- and overrepresentation of children in care by being aware of the cultural differences between families in parenting, being aware of our own biases, valuing the importance of culture in a child's life. While it is important to be aware of disproportionality and disparity, if you have reasonable cause to suspect that a child is a victim of abuse, you should report. Would you like to know more about child welfare in Pennsylvania? To learn more about Pennsylvania's effort to protect children, select the button. Section 6. Learning Objective. Describe the roles, rights, and responsibilities of mandated and permissive reporters of suspected child abuse. Who must report suspected child abuse? Mandated reporters. Who is encouraged to report suspected child abuse? Permissive reporters. Reporting abuse, the bottom line. Who should report suspected child abuse? Anyone with reasonable cause to suspect that a child is a victim of abuse should report. Two types of reporters. We all share responsibility for protecting the children of our community from harm. Taking responsibility by reporting suspected child abuse is an important means to keep Pennsylvania's children safe and may also serve to connect families in need to crucial services and support. There are two types of reporters. Mandated reporters are required by law to report suspected child abuse. Permissive reporters are strongly encouraged to report suspected child abuse. Mandated reporters. Child Protective Services laws specifically enumerates individuals who are mandated reporters. Select the button for the full list of persons required by law to report suspected child abuse. Mandated reporters. Mandated reporters. A person licensed or certified to practice in any health-related field under the jurisdiction of the Department of State. Medical examiner, coroner, funeral director, an employee of a healthcare facility or provider licensed by the Department of Health who is engaged in the admission, examination, care, or treatment of individuals. A school employee, an employee of a child care service who has direct contact with children in the course of employment. A clergyman, priest, rabbi, minister, Christian Science practitioner, religious healer, or spiritual leader of any regularity is established church or other religious organization. An individual paid or unpaid who, on the basis of their role as an integral part of a regularly scheduled program, activity, or service, is a person responsible for the child's welfare or has direct contact with children. An employee of social services agency who has direct contact with children in the course of employment, a peace officer or law enforcement official, an emergency medical service provider certified by the Department of Health, an employee of a public library who has direct contact with children in the course of employment, an independent contractor, an individual supervised or managed by a person listed above who has direct contact with children in the course of employment, an attorney affiliated with an agency, institution, organization, or other entity, including a school or regularly established religious organization that is responsible for the care, supervision, guidance, or control of children. 15. A foster parent. Mandated reports, healthcare. Many people who work in healthcare professions or work for a healthcare facility are mandated reporters, including medical examiners, coroners, and funeral directors. An employee of a healthcare facility or provider licensed by the Department of Health who is engaged in the admission, examination, care, or treatment of individuals. Definition of healthcare provider. The definition of healthcare provider includes licensed hospitals or healthcare facilities, individuals who are licensed, certified, or otherwise regulated to provide healthcare services under the laws of this Commonwealth. Healthcare providers listed under CPSL: physician, podiatrist, optometrist, psychologist, physical therapist, certified nurse practitioner, registered nurse, nurse midwife, physician assistants, chiropractor, dentist, pharmacist, individual accredited or certified to provide behavioral health services. Mandatory reporting of substance affected infants. A healthcare provider shall immediately give notice or cause notice to be given to the department if the provider is involved in the delivery or care of a child under 1 year of age, and the healthcare provider has determined based on standards of professional practice the child was born affected by substance use or withdrawal symptoms resulting from parental drug exposure or a fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Notification to the department can be made to Childline electronically through the Child Welfare Portal or at 1-800-932-0313. This notification is for the purpose of accessing a child and the child's family for a plan of safe care and shall not constitute a child abuse report. Act 54 of 2018. After the healthcare provider's notification of substance-affected infants, plan of safe care. After notification of a child born affected by substance or use or withdrawal symptoms resulting from parental drug exposure or a fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and prior to the child's discharge from the healthcare facility, a multidisciplinary team meeting must be held assessing the needs of the child and the child's parents and immediate caregivers. The meeting will inform an assessment of the needs of the child and the child's parents and immediate caregivers to determine the most appropriate led agency for developing, implementing, and monitoring a plan of safe care. This is decided at the multidisciplinary team meeting, which must be held prior to the child's discharge from the healthcare facility. The child's parents and immediate caregivers must be engaged to identify their needs for access to treatment for any substance use disorder or other physical behavioral health conditions that may impact the safety, early childhood development, and well-being of the child. Ongoing involvement of the county agency after taking into consideration the individual needs of the child and the child's parents and immediate caregivers may not be required. Notification to department and development of plan of safe care for children under 1 year of age. Mandated reporters, state board licensed. Persons licensed or certified by state boards in any health-related field are mandated reporters. Licensed funeral directors are also mandated reporters. Select the button for a list of state boards. Cool. Mandated reporters, school employees, and others with direct contact. School employees, for example, are mandated reporters. The definition of school includes vocational, charter, and private schools, as well as institutions of higher education. A school employee is an individual who is employed by a school or who provides a program, activity, or service sponsored by a school. The term does not apply to administrative or other support personnel unless the administrative or other support personnel have direct contact with children. Child daycare centers, foster and adoptive homes, boarding homes, juvenile detention centers, early intervention centers, and drug and alcohol programs are all environments where adults who have direct contact with children are named as mandated reporters in the CPSL. Direct contact with children. Certain individuals are mandated to report because they have direct contact with children in the course of their employment. Child care services, social services, and public library employees are mandated to report because they have direct contact with children in the course of their employment. Please select the button to learn more about the term child care services. A clergyman, priest, rabbi, minister, Christian Science practitioner, religious healer, or spiritual leader of any irregularity, established church, or other religious organization is a mandated reporter. Mandated reporters, spiritual leaders. Confidential communications made to a member of the clergy are protected under Pennsylvania law. Confidential communications to clergymen. The law explains when such communication is protected and when it must be reported. Clergy cannot be compelled to disclose privileged information. Privileged communications. A general rule, subject to subsection B relating to confidential communications. The privileged communication between a mandated reporter and a patient or client of the mandated reporter shall not apply to a situation involving child abuse. Relieve the mandated reporter of duty to make a report of suspected child abuse. Check your understanding. Pastor Waverly is leading a Sunday school class discussion when Miss Wiley shares with the group a time when she was feeling spiritually challenged. She speaks of the stress she was experiencing and how that affected her 2 children. While sharing her story, she revealed that on at least one occasion she lost her temper, hit her 4-year-old son, and caused bruising and bleeding on his backside. Good Lord. In this situation, Pastor Waverly has reasonable cause to suspect that Miss Wiley's 4-year-old son is a victim of abuse. Pastor Waverly is required by law to report. The information was not shared as privileged communication in a confidential setting. There was specific disclosure that an identifiable child was a victim to the abuse. The child victim does not have to be under the care, supervision, or guidance of the mandated reporter for the mandated reporter to be required to report suspected abuse. Mandated reporters, individuals paid or unpaid. A mandated reporter includes an individual, paid or unpaid, who, on the basis of the individual's role as an integral part of a regularly scheduled program, activity, or service, is a person responsible for child's welfare or has direct contact with children. The following are examples of programs, activities, and services in which children participate and which may be sponsored by a school or public or private organization. This list is not defined by the CPSL and is not all-inclusive. Youth camp or program, a recreational camper program, a sports or athletic program, a community or social outreach program, an enrichment or educational program, a troop, club, or similar organization. Mandated reporters, social service, law enforcement, and adult family members. Social service employees who have direct contact with children in the course of their employment are mandated reporters. Foster parents, peace officers, and law enforcement officials are mandated reporters. An adult family member who is a mandated reporter is a person 18 years of age or older who is responsible for the child's welfare and provides services to a child in a family home, community home for individuals with an intellectual disability, or host home for children which are subject to supervision or licensure by department. Mandated reporters, library employees. Employees of public libraries who have direct contact with children in the course of their employment are mandated reporters. Mandated reporters, attorneys. An attorney is also a mandated reporter when affiliated with an agency, institution, organization, or other entity, including a school, regularly established religious organization that is responsible for the care, supervision, guidance, or control of children. Mandated reporter attorneys. Confidential communications made to an attorney are protected so long as they are within the scope of 42 PACS Grog 5916 relating to confidential communications to attorney and 5928 relating to confidential communications to attorney. The attorney work product doctrine or the rules of professional conduct for attorneys. Mandated reporters in institutions, schools, facilities, or agencies. Mandated reporters who have reasonable cause to suspect that a child is a victim of abuse and who are staff at a medical or other public, private institution, school, facility, or agency must themselves make an immediate and direct report to Childline. After reporting to Childline, these mandated reporters must then notify the person in charge of their designee of their institution, school, agency, or facility. The person in charge of their designee must facilitate the cooperation of the institution, school, facility, or agency with any investigation of the report. The CPSL imposes penalties if any person attempts to intimidate, retaliate, or obstruct an individual from reporting suspected child abuse. No more than one report to Childline of an incident is required from the institution, school, facility, or agency. Individuals supervised by mandated reporters. Those individuals who are supervised or managed by other mandated reporters and have direct contact with children in their employment are also mandated reporters. Independent contractors are mandated reporters. An independent contractor is an individual who provides a program, activity, or service to an agency, institution, organization, or other entity, including a school or regularly established religious organization that is responsible for the care, supervision, guidance, or control of children. The term does not apply to administrative or other support personnel unless the administrative or other support personnel have direct contact with children. Independent contractors are mandated reporters when they provide programs, activities, or services to agencies, institutions, organizations, or other entities, including schools, religious organizations that are responsible for the care, supervision, guidance, or control of children. Administrative or other supportive personnel in schools are not mandated reporters unless they have direct contact with children. Mandated reporters for process for reporting child abuse. What is the first step of the process for mandated reporters who are staff at institutions, schools, facilities, or agencies when there is a concern about child abuse or neglect? A mandated reporter shall make a report of suspected child abuse in accordance with Section 6313 if the mandated reporter has reasonable cause to suspect that the child is a victim of child abuse under any of the following circumstances. 1. The mandated reporter comes in contact with a child in the course of employment, occupation, and practice of a profession or through a regularly scheduled program or service. 2. The mandated reporter is directly responsible for the care, supervision, guidance, or training of the child, or is affiliated with an agency, institution, organization, school, regularly established church or religious organization, or other entity that is directly responsible for the care, supervision, guidance, or training of the child. 3. A person makes a specific disclosure at the mandated reporter that an identifiable child is the victim of child abuse. 4. An individual 14 years of age or older makes a specific disclosure to the mandated reporter that the individual has committed child abuse. Check your understanding. The requirement to report. Directions. Read the following 2 scenarios. Answer the question that follows each scenario. Deanna is a therapist in a private practice. During a counseling session, Deanna's client, Mia, age 16, tells Deanna that she has been touching her 8-year-old sister's private parts. The 8-year-old is not under the care, guidance, or supervision of Deanna or her agency. Is Deanna required to make a report? Yes. How did you answer?
Check your understanding. The requirement to report. After work, Deanna attended an exercise class. Her instructor told her that her 9-year-old nephew, Michael, who lives with her, came home after visiting with his mom with a black eye and bruises on his face and arms. Michael did not provide any details to his aunt, but did acknowledge his mom hit him. Yes. Check your understanding. Reporting child abuse. Marion is a contracted therapist for a children's residential treatment program. While grocery store shopping with her husband after work, she witnesses a woman from her neighborhood, Deborah, slapping her youngest son, Levi, across the face. Because Levi does not stop crying, Deborah begins yelling and yanks Levi out of the grocery cart by his arm. He falls to the floor, banging his nose against the grocery cart, causing it to bleed. Deborah grabs Levi and begins shaking him uncontrollably while yelling. Yes. Goodness. Wow. Did you know that you should probably report that? Fucking wow. I can't believe that. That was insane. Amelia is an emergency room nurse at the local hospital. One day she is treating a 16-year-old girl, Jade, for a twisted ankle. Jade tells Amelia that she is worried about her 5-year-old sister and explains that she got angry with her sister last night and hit her hard enough to leave marks on her sister's back, legs, and arms. Is Amelia required to report? Yes. Yep, because guess what? If you're over 14... Troy is a volunteer high school where he regularly provides tutoring. One of his students, Rosita, tells Troy that her mother burned her 3-year-old Miguel on his buttocks with a curling iron because he was misbehaving. Rosita states that Miguel screamed and cried. What? Curling iron? Holy shit. The law does not require a child to come before mandated reporters for them to make a report of suspected child abuse. The mandated reporter to identify the person responsible for the child abuse to make a report. Mandated reporter training requirements 1 of 4. Licensing boards with jurisdiction over professional licensees who are mandated reporters under the CPSL must require those individuals applying for a license or certification to complete at least 3 hours of approved child abuse and reporting continuing education. Individuals seeking renewal of a license or certification must complete at least 2 hours of approved child abuse reporting and continuing education. These continuing education requirements must be completed by each licensee as a part of their biennial license renewal. Select the button for the list of state licensing boards. This is the same one I already had up. Cool. Mandated reporter training requirements 2 of 4. New employees having direct contact with children in child serving institution facilities or agencies that DHS licenses approved or registers, and new foster parents must receive 3 hours of training within 90 days of hire or approval and 3 hours of training every 5 years thereafter. Prospective operators of child serving institutions, facilities, or agencies, or family daycare home that DHS licenses approved or registers must receive 3 hours of training prior to the issuance of a license, approval, or registration certificate, and 3 hours of training every 5 years thereafter. The following must receive 3 hours of training prior to the reissuance of a license, approval, or registration certificate, and 3 hours of training every 5 years thereafter. Current operators of child serving institutions, facilities, or agencies that DHS licenses, approve, or registers. Current employees having direct contact with children in child serving institutions, facilities, or agencies that DHS licenses, approved, or registers. Current caregivers and employers in family daycare homes, current foster parents, adult family members who is responsible for the child's welfare and is providing services to a child in a family living home, a community home for individuals with an intellectual disability, or a host home which is subject to supervision or licensure by the department. Mandated reporter training requirements 404. To learn more about these training requirements and other sources of training, visit the Keep Kids Safe PA website by selecting the button. Are you a mandated or permissive reporter? Please consider each of the categories of mandated reports that were previously presented before concluding that you are not a mandated reporter. I am a mandated reporter. If you are not a mandated reporter, you are considered a permissive reporter. In Pennsylvania, you are encouraged to make report of suspected child abuse regardless of professional affiliation. Once a report is received, specially trained child welfare professionals determine whether the child is a victim of abuse. Reporting suspected child abuse is a community responsibility. Protecting children from abuse is a community responsibility. A concerned neighbor, friend, witness, or bystander who reports suspected harm to a child may be the first person to step forward and make help available. Preferred ways to report to Childline. Permissive reporters should make reports of suspected child abuse to Childline by telephone. How to report will be covered in Section 9. Childline 1-800-932-0313. Mandated reporters shall immediately make a report of suspected child abuse to Childline, and this report can be made electronically through the Child Welfare Portal (CWIS). If a mandated reporter makes an oral or verbal report of suspected child abuse to the DHS via telephone, they shall also make a written report via the Child Welfare Portal within 48 hours. How to report is covered in Section 9. Would you like to know more about Section 6? In order to complete... School employees are mandated reporters and must therefore contact Section 7. Reporter rights and responsibilities. Section 7. Learning objective. Recognize the protections and consequences related to reporting child abuse. Section 7. Protections for reporters. Mandated reporters. Failure to report. Mandated reporters. Right to know. Protections for all reporters. The CPSL protects all reporters of suspected child abuse. General rule: a person, hospital, institution, school, facility, agency, or agency employee acting in good faith shall have immunity from civil and criminal liability that might otherwise result from any of the following: making a report of suspected child abuse or making a referral for general protective services regardless of whether the report is required to be made under the PA-CPSL. Cooperating or consulting with an investigation under the PA-CPSL, including providing information to a child facility or near a child fatality or near fatality review team, testifying in a proceeding arising out of instance of suspected child abuse or general protective services, engaging in any action authorized under the 23 PA-CS 6314 relating to photographs, medical tests, and X-ray of child subject to report. Protections for all reporters continued. The CPSL provides additional protections for reporters. For the purpose of any civil or criminal proceeding, the good faith of a person required to report suspected child abuse and of any person required to make a referral to law enforcement officers under the PA-CPSL shall be presumed. Those who make reports of suspected child abuse or of a crime against a child are not in violation of the Mental Health Procedures Act by releasing information necessary to complete the report. The law imposes penalties if any person attempts to intimidate, retaliate, or obstruct an individual from reporting suspected child abuse. A reporter may also take action for appropriate relief if, as a result of making the report of suspected child abuse, the person is discharged from employment or discriminated against with respect to compensation, higher tenure, terms, conditions, or privileges of employment. Please select the buttons for the specifics on protection from employment discrimination and immunity from liability. General rule: a person, a hospital, institution, school, facility, agency, or agency employee acting in good faith shall have it. This is what we just read. Applicability. This section does not apply to an individual making a report of suspected child abuse who is found to be a perpetrator because of the report, or to any individual who fails to make a report of suspected child abuse as required under Section 6311, and is subject to conviction under Section 6319 for failure to report or refer. Good Lord, this is what I just read. The CPSL protects all reporters of suspected child abuse, including department and county officials and employees. B. Department and county agency immunity. An official or employee of DHS county agency who refers to a report of suspected child abuse for general protective services to law enforcement authorities or provide services as authorized by the PA-CPSL shall have immunity from civil and criminal liability that might otherwise result from the action. Protections. Confidentiality. Reporters are protected by strict confidentiality provisions, except for reporters under Section 6340 and 9 and 10 of the PA-CPSL, and in response to a law enforcement official investigating allegations of false report under 18 PACS 4906.1 relating to false reports of child abuse. The release of identifying data by prohibit the department, county, institution, school, facility, or agency, or designated agent of the person in charge about the reporter of suspected child abuse, or those who coopered in a subsequent investigation is prohibited. Law enforcement officials shall treat all reporting sources as confidential informants. Certain reports are also covered by strict confidentiality provisions. Confidentiality reports 23 PACS 6339, except as otherwise provided in subchapter C of the PA-CPSL relating to powers and duties of department, or by the Pennsylvania Rules of Juvenile Court Procedure. Reports made pursuant to the PA-CPSL, including but not limited to report summaries of child abuse and reports made pursuant to the Section 6313 relating to, as well as any other information obtained, reports written, or photographs or x-rays taken concerning alleged instances of child abuse in possession of DHS or a county agency shall be confidential. Reporters' right to receive information. Those who make a report of suspected child abuse have the right to receive information about the final status of the report and about services provided or arranged to protect the child. However, a reporter who makes a report that results in an assessment for general protective services does not have the right to receive information about the final status. DHS responsibility. The department must notify the mandated reporter of the final status of report and about services provided or arranged within 3 business days after receiving the final results of an investigation. The Department of Human Services notification responsibilities. The department is also responsible for notifying school administrators and child care service employers the following. If the alleged perpetrator is a school employee or child care service employee, the department must provide notification of the pending allegation and the final status of the report following investigation as to whether the report is indicated founded or unfounded. The notification must be provided within 10 days of the completion of the investigation. If the perpetrator is a school employee, the department must also provide notice of the final status of the report of the Department of Education within 10 days of the completion of the investigation. Please select the button below to review the definitions for the very important terms indicated, founded, and unfounded. Indicated, founded, and unfounded. Indicated report subject to paragraphs 2 and 3. A reported child abuse made pursuant to this chapter if an investigation by the Department County Agency determines that substantial evidence of the alleged abuse by a perpetrator exists based on any of the following: available medical evidence, the Child Protective Service investigation, and admission of the acts of abuse by the perpetrator. A report may be indicated under paragraph 1 or 2 for any child who is the victim of child abuse, regardless of the number of alleged perpetrators. A report may be indicated under paragraph 1 or 2, listing the perpetrator as unknown if substantial evidence of abuse by perpetrator exists, but the Department County Agency is unable to identify a specific perpetrator. Amended by the Act 108 of 2013. Founded report: a child abuse report involving a perpetrator that is made pursuant to this chapter. If any of the following applies, there has been a judicial adjudication based on a finding that a child who is subject of the report has been abused, and the adjudication involves the same factual circumstances involved in the allegation of the child abuse. The judicial adjudication may include any of the following: the entry of a plea guilty or nolo contendere, a finding of guilt to a criminal charge, a finding of dependency under 42 PACS 6341 relating to education. If the court has entered a finding that a child who is the subject of the report has been abused, a finding of delinquency under 42 PACS 6341. If the court has entered a finding that the child who is the subject of the report has been abused by the child who was found to be delinquent, there has been an acceptance into the accelerated rehabilitative disposition program, and the reason for the acceptance involves the same factual circumstances involved in the allegation of child abuse. There has been a consistent decree entered in a juvenile proceeding under 42 PACS CHC 63 relating to juvenile matters. The decree involves the same factual circumstances involved in the allegation of child abuse. In the terms and conditions of constant decree include an acknowledgement, admission, or finding that a child who is the subject of the report has been accused by the child who is alleged to be delinquent. 4. A final protection from abuse order has been granted under Section 6108 relating to relief when the child who is subject of the report is one of the individuals protected under the protection from abuse order, and 1. Only one individual is charged with the abuse in the protection from abuse action. 2. Only that individual defends against the charge. 3. The adjudication involves the same factual circumstances involved in the allegation of child abuse. And 4. The protection from abuse adjudication finds that the child abuse occurred. Unfounded report: any report made pursuant to this chapter unless the report is a founded report or an indicated report. Mandated reporters: failure to report. Mandated reporters are required by CPSL to report when they have reasonable cause to suspect a child is the victim of abuse. A mandated reporter who willfully fails to make a report of suspect child abuse could face legal penalties, including fines and/or incarcerations. These penalties increase with repeated violations. The statute of limitations for an offense under this section shall be either the statute of limitations for the crime committed against the minor child or 5 years, whichever is greater. Good Lord. Restating what is said in the text. Failure to report. The offense is a felony of the third degree if the person or official willfully fails to report. The child abuse continues a felony of the first degree or higher, and the person official has direct knowledge of the nature of the abuse. An offense not otherwise specified previously is a misdemeanor of the second degree. If a mandated reporter makes a report to law enforcement or the appropriate county in lieu of reporting to Childline, this is not an offense under this subsection, as long as the report was made in good faith effort to comply with the requirements to report. Maximum penalty associated with committing a felony of the third degree in Pennsylvania, not more than 7 years in prison and up to $15,000 in fine. Maximum penalty associated with committing a misdemeanor of the second degree in Pennsylvania, not more than 2 years in prison and up to $5,000 in fines. Continual failure to report. If child abuse continues because a mandated reporter willfully fails to report their knowledge of or reasonable cause to suspect child abuse, or while the person knows or has reasonable cause to suspect that the same individual continues to have direct contact with children through the individual's employment, program, activity, or service, the mandated reporter commits a felony of the third degree, except that if the child abuse constitutes a felony of the first degree or higher, the person commits a felony of the second degree. Multiple failures to report offenses. A person who, at the time of sentencing, has been convicted of a prior offense commits a felony of the third degree, except that if the child abuse constitutes a felony of the first degree or higher, the penalty for the What am I reading? Title 23, Chapter 63, Chapter 63, Child Protective Services, Subchapter A, Preliminary Provisions, B, Provisions and Responsibilities for Reporting Suspected Child Abuse, C, Powers and Duties of Department, C1, Students in Public and Private Schools, C2, Background Checks for Employment in Schools, D, Organization and Responsibilities of Child Protective Service, E, Miscellaneous Provisions. Enactment. Chapter 63 was added December 19, 1990, PL 1240, number 206, effective in 90 days. Saved from suspension, Pennsylvania Rule of Civil Procedure number 1915.24, as amended March 30th, 1994, provided that Chapter 63 shall not be deemed suspended or affected by Rules 1915.1 through 1915.18 relating to actions for custody, partial custody, and visitation of minor children. Cross-references. Chapter 63 is referred to in sections 5323, 5329.1, 5701, 6102, 6106, 6116, 6344, 6504.3, 6508, 6509 of this title, sections 4304, 4906.1, 4958, 9106, 9121 of Title 18 Crimes and Offenses, sections 3118, 5945, 52A 16, 6311, 6342 of Title 42 Judiciary and Judicial Procedures, section 2164 of Title 53 Municipalities generally. Section 8. After you report. Section 8 Learning Objectives. Recognize the process that follows after a report is made. Understand the roles and responsibilities of the county agency once a report is received. Section 8 Childline's receipt, determination, and transmission of reports of suspected child abuse. County agency response when a report is transmitted from Childline. Reports to Childline. Mandated reporters are encouraged to report electronically to Childline. Permissive reporters report by telephone to Childline.
After you report, Childline. Childline receives the report and determines who is to respond to the report, dependent upon the information reported, such as the identity, if known, of the person who allegedly acted to abuse or harm a child. After you report, Childline. If Childline receives the report, it will immediately transmit the information to the appropriate county agency and/or law enforcement if the report also alleges that a criminal offense has been committed against a child. After you report, transmission of reports. If a person identified falls under the definition of perpetrator, Childline will refer the report to the appropriate county agency for an investigation. If the person identified is not a perpetrator and the behavior reported includes a violation of crime, Childline will refer the report to law enforcement officials. If a person identified falls under the definition of perpetrator and the behavior reported includes a criminal violation, Childline will refer the report to the appropriate county agency and law enforcement officials. After you report, protective services. When a report indicates that a child abuse did not occur, but the child may be in need of other protective services, commonly referred to as general protective services, the child welfare professional will assess the needs of the child and take action to provide any appropriate support. General Protective Services. General Protective Services are services designed to protect the rights and welfare of children so that they have an opportunity for healthy growth and development and to prevent potential for harm to a child who meets one of the following conditions. Is without proper parental care or control, substance, education, as required by law, or other care or control necessary for his physical, mental, or emotional health or morals, has been placed for care or adoption in violation of law, has been abandoned by his parents, guardian, or other custodian, is without a parent, guardian, or legal custodian, is habitually and without justification truant from school while subject to compulsory school attendance. General Protective Services continued. General Protective Services are services designed to prevent the potential for harm to a child who meets one of the following conditions: has committed a specific act of habitual disobedience of the reasonable and lawful commands of his parent, guardian, or other custodian, and who is ungovernable and found to be in need of care, treatment, or supervision, is under 10 years of age and has committed a delinquent act, has been formally adjudicated dependent under Section 6341 of the Juvenile Act, and is under the jurisdiction of the court, subject to its conditions or placements, and who commits an act which is defined as ungovernable in subparagraph 4, has been referred under Section 6323 of the Juvenile Act, and commits an act which is defined as ungovernable in subparagraph 4. After you report, transmission of reports. If a report indicates that general protective services are needed, Childline will refer the report to the proper county agency to assess the needs of the child and provide services when appropriate. Check your understanding. The requirement to report. Childline receives a report stating that incidents occurring out of state. Incidents occurring out of state. The county agency may receive reports regarding incidents occurring outside of Pennsylvania involving children and/or alleged perpetrators who reside in Pennsylvania. The CPSL amendments outline the child welfare professional's responsibilities when these reports are made. After you report, county agency actions. Upon receipt of a report involving a person who is defined as a perpetrator, a child welfare professional will consider multiple factors to determine whether a child is victim of abuse, including whether any exclusions described in the law may apply. It is not a reporter's responsibility to consider exclusions. Select the button to read about the exclusions. Please note, nothing in the PA-CPSL requires a person who has reasonable cause to suspect a child is a victim of child abuse to consider the exclusions from child abuse before making a report of suspected child abuse. 23 PA Constitution Stat 6304 definitions. The following are exclusions from the substantiation of child abuse and not exclusions from reporting. A. Environmental factors. No child shall be deemed to be physically or mentally abused based on injuries that result solely from the environmental factors, such as inadequate housing, furnishings, income, clothing, and medical care, that are beyond the control of the parent or person responsible for the child's welfare with whom the child resides. This subsection shall not apply to any child care services as defined under Section 6303A of the PA-CPSL, excluding an adoptive parent. B. Practice of religious beliefs. If, upon investigation, the county agency determines that a child has not been provided need for medical or surgical care because of sincerely held religious beliefs of the child's parents or relative within the third degree of consanguinity and with whom the child resides, which beliefs are consistent with those of a bona fide religion, the child shall not be deemed to be physically or mentally abused. In such cases, the following shall apply. 1. The county agency shall closely monitor the child and the child's family and shall seek court-ordered medical intervention when the lack of medical or surgical care threatens the child's life or long-term health. 2. All correspondence with a subject of the report and the records of the department and the county agency shall not reference child abuse and shall acknowledge the religious basis for the child's condition. 3. The family shall be referred for general protective services if appropriate. 4. This exclusion shall not apply if the failure to provide needed medical or surgical care causes the death of a child. 5. This exclusion shall not apply to any child care service as defined under Section 6303A of the PA-CPSL, excluding an adoptive parent. C. Use of force for supervision, control, and safety purposes. Subject to subsection D relating to rights of parents, the use of reasonable force on or against a child by the child's own parent or person responsible for the child's welfare shall not be considered child abuse if any of the following conditions apply. 1. The use of reasonable force constitutes incidental, minor, or reasonable physical contact with the child or other actions that are designed to maintain order and control. 2. The use of reasonable force is necessary. 1. To quell disturbance or remove the child from the scene of a disturbance that threatens physical injury to persons or damage to property. 2. To prevent the child from self-inflicted physical harm. 3. For self-defense or the defense of another individual. Or 4. To obtain possessions of weapons or other dangerous objects or controlled substances or paraphernalia that are on the child or within the control of the child. D. Rights of parents. Nothing in the PA-CPSL shall be constituted to restrict the generally recognized existing rights of parents to use reasonable force on or against their children for the purpose of supervision, control, and discipline of their children. Such reasonable force shall not constitute child abuse. E. Participation in events that involve physical contact with child. An individual participating in a practice or competition in an interscholastic sport, physical education, a recreational activity, or an extracurricular activity that involves physical contact with a child does not in itself constitute contact that is subject to the reporting requirements of the CPSL. F. Child-on-child contact. 1. Harm or injury to a child that results from the act of another child shall not constitute child abuse unless the child who caused the harm or injury is a perpetrator. 2. Notwithstanding paragraph 1, the following shall apply. 1. Acts constituting any of the following crimes against a child shall be subject to the reporting requirements of the CPSL. A. Rape, as defined in 18 PA CS 3121. B. Involuntary deviate sexual intercourse as defined in 18 PA-CS 3123. D. Sexual assault as defined in 18 PA-CS 3124.1. D. Aggravated incident assault as defined in 18 PA-CS 3125. E. Incident assault as defined in 18 PA-CS 3126. F. Indecent exposure as defined in 18 PA-CS 3127. 2. No child shall be deemed to be a perpetrator of child abuse based solely on physical or mental injuries caused to another child in the course of a dispute, fight, or scuffle entered into by mutual consent. 3. A law enforcement official who receives a report of suspected child abuse is not required to make a report to the department under Section 6334A if the person allegedly responsible for the child abuse is a non-perpetrator child. G. Defensive force. Reasonable force for self-defense or the defense of another individual consistent with the provisions of 18 PA-CS 505 and 506 shall not be considered child abuse. After you report, joint investigations. If a report involves a perpetrator and the behavior reported includes a criminal violation, the child welfare professional and law enforcement will jointly investigate the report. It is not a reporter's responsibility to determine if the person who allegedly committed child abuse or harm to a child is a perpetrator. Receipt of reports by a county agency. When a report is made directly to a county agency and not Childline, after ensuring the safety of the child and any other child in the child's home, the county agency must immediately notify the department of the report. A mandated reporter making an oral/verbal report of suspected child abuse to the DHS via the statewide toll-free telephone number shall also make a written report CY47, which may be submitted electronically within 48 hours to DHS or county agencies. A county agency assigned to the case in a manner and format prescribed by DHS. The failure of the mandated reporter to file the written report CY47 described in the paragraph immediately above shall not relieve the county agency from any duty under the PA-CPSL, and the county agency shall proceed as though the mandated reporter complied. After you report, notification of investigation. The county agency must orally notify the subject of the report of the right to have an attorney present during the interview prior to interviewing the subject. The subject of the report is any child, parent, guardian, or other person responsible for the welfare of a child or any alleged or actual perpetrator in a report made to the department or a county agency under this chapter. This requirement does not apply to the alleged victim. After you report, prompt access to information. Photographs, medical tests, and x-rays. When photographs, medical summaries, radiological examinations, and/or other medical tests are available, they must be provided to the county agency at the time the written report is sent, or within 48 hours after a report is made by electronic technologies, or as soon thereafter as possible. After you report, information sharing, 1 of 3. CPSL amendments require certified medical practitioners and county agencies to share information under circumstances that negatively affect the mental health of a child. When an assessment for general protective services or a child abuse investigation is being conducted, or when the family has been accepted for services by a county agency, a certified medical practitioner must promptly provide the county agency with information, including relevant medical information
known to the licensed practitioner regarding the child's prior and current health, information from a subsequent examination, information regarding treatment of a child, relevant medical information regarding any other child in the household where such information may contribute to the assessment, investigation, or provision of services by the county agency to the child or other children in the household. Parental consent is not required for the certified medical practitioner to provide this information. After you report, information sharing, 2 of 3. In circumstances that negatively affect the medical health of a child, the county agency must notify the certified medical practitioner who is the child's primary care provider, if known, of the following: the final status of any assessment of general protective services or an investigation of child abuse if the report of child abuse is indicated or founded, information on an unfounded report of child abuse if the licensed certified medical practitioner made the report as a mandated reporter under Section 6311, if accepted for services, any service provided, arranged for, or to be provided by the county agency. After you report, information sharing, 3 of 3. If requested by the child's primary care physician or a licensed certified medical practitioner who is providing medical care to the child, the county agency, to ensure the proper medical care of the child, shall provide the following information as it pertains to circumstances which negatively affect the medical health of the child: the identity of other licensed certified medical practitioners providing medical care to the child so as to obtain the child's medical records and allow for a coordination of care between medical practitioners. Section 8. After you report, provisions of services. In addition to investigating child abuse and assessing for general protective services, the county agency is responsible for providing protective services to prevent further abuses to children, providing or arranging for and monitoring the provision of services necessary to safeguard children, ensuring the well-being and development of children, and to preserve and stabilize the family life whenever appropriate. Pennsylvania's Child Welfare Practice Model. To accomplish these tasks, Pennsylvania has implemented a Child Welfare Practice Model. This model supports a team approach and emphasizes modeling the values and principles of child welfare practice at every level and across all partnerships. Pennsylvania's Child Welfare Practice Model guides children, youth, families, child welfare representatives, and other service partners in working together to ensure safety from abuse and neglect, enduring and certain performance and timely achievement of stability, supports, and lifelong connections. Enhancement of the family's ability to meet their child/youth's well-being, including physical, emotional, behavioral, and educational needs. Support for families within their own homes and communities through comprehensive and accessible services that build on strengths and address individual trauma, needs, and concerns. Strengthened families that successfully sustain positive change towards safe, nurturing, and healthy environments, and skilled and responsive child welfare professionals with a shared sense of accountability for assuring child-centered, family-focused policy, best practice, and positive outcomes. Building adult capacity. The video Building Adult Capacity is to Improve Child Outcome from Harvard Center on the Developing Child provides an overview of how we as a community can work together on improving outcomes for children who are at greatest risk by focusing on the development of adults and strengthening their capacity to provide healthy environments for their children. Please select the button to access the video. Before you proceed to the next section about entering a referral in the CWIS system, please take time to carefully review some essential points from the course so far.
The basis for reporting suspected child abuse is having reasonable cause to suspect a child is victim of child abuse. A person who has reasonable cause to suspect a child is victim of child abuse is not required to identify the type of abuse they are reporting when making a report of suspected child abuse. The PA-CPSL recognizes three components of child abuse: child, act or failure to act, recent act or failure to act, a series of acts or failures to act, intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly. Mandated reporter enumerated under Section 6311A of the PA-CPSL must immediately make a report of suspected child abuse to Childline, Pennsylvania's 24/7 child abuse hotline and registry, by calling 1-800-932-0313 or electronically through the Child Welfare Portal if they have reasonable cause to suspect a child is a victim of child abuse under any of the following circumstances. The mandated reporter comes into contact with the child in the course of employment, occupation, and practice of a profession or through a regularly scheduled program, activity, or service. The mandated reporter is directly responsible for the care, supervision, guidance, or training of the child, or is affiliated with an agency, institution, organization, school, regularly established church or religious organization, or other entity that is directly responsible for the care, supervision, guidance, or training of the child. A person makes a specific disclosure to the mandated reporter that an identifiable child is a victim of child abuse. An individual 14 years of age or older makes a specific disclosure to the mandated reporter that the individual has committed child abuse. Nothing in Section 6311 of the PA-CPSL requires a child to come before the mandated reporter in order for the mandated reporter to make a report of suspected child abuse. Nothing in Section 6311 of the PA-CPSL requires the mandated reporter to identify the person responsible for the child abuse in order to make a report of suspected child abuse. Nothing in the PA-CPSL requires a person who has a reasonable cause to suspect a child is a victim of child abuse to consider the exclusion from child abuse in order to make a report of suspected child abuse. A mandated reporter is presumed to have acted in good faith when making a report of suspected child abuse. You have completed Section 8. Begin Section 9. Section 9. How to submit a referral electronically through the Child Welfare Portal. Please note that the information presented in this section describes the process for mandated reporters to submit a referral electronically through the Child Welfare Portal. Permissive reporters should make reports to suspected child abuse to Childline by telephone at 1-800-932-0313. Reporting child abuse. Improved processes. When Pennsylvania lawmakers strengthened Child Protective Services laws, they took into account the need to modernize and streamline the process. Reporting child abuse. Improved processes. The Child Welfare Information Solution, CWIS, uses information technology to increase efficiency and tracking of child abuse data and establishes a central data to hold statewide child welfare information. Select the link for more information about what CWIS can do. Only authorized personnel have access to the database. Reporting child abuse. Improved processes. CWIS both streamlines and clarifies the mandatory child abuse reporting process. Mandated reporters can now file an electronic report of suspected child abuse online. CWIS is designed to provide the following benefits: Child safety. Provide near-time data on children being served by the county agency. Allow for the exchange of information across counties. Eliminate gaps in information throughout the life of a case. Improve the accuracy and timeliness of data to evaluate program performance and outcomes. Improve tracking and auditing of state and federal funds. Electronically transferred GPS and CPS cases to and from the state to appropriate counties. A web for mandated reporters to submit CPS and GPS cases online. Ability to electronically submit and receive a child abuse history clearance through online capabilities. Reporting child abuse improves processes. This section of the course will take you through the steps to make an electronic report through the Child Welfare Service self-service portal. The system uses the word referral to designate a report of suspected child abuse. Completion of this section of the training will familiarize you with the referral process. Are you a CCYA employee? Please note, county children and youth agencies employ electronic data systems specific to their agencies. The steps in completing a data report may differ from the screenshots here because you will access the report function through your own system. Please review the electronic reporting process of your agency with your supervisor. The Child Welfare Portal, the homepage. Homepage, FAQ, and Contact Us. Locate the FAQ and Contact Us links on the homepage. Information concerning recent amendments to Child Protective Services Law can be found in the FAQ sections. Homepage. Create or log into an account. In order to make a referral, you must have an account. If you already have registered and have a Keystone ID, you may log in. New users should select Create a New Account. Citizen registration. Selecting Create New Account will bring the user to the citizen registration page. The new user will read the information, then select Next. Create Keystone ID. After completing the required information to create your Keystone ID, select Finish on the bottom right of the screen. Check your email. The system will send an email containing your temporary password to the email address you specified for your Keystone ID account. Return to the Child Welfare Portal. Select the Child Welfare Portal link provided in the email to return to the Child Welfare Portal homepage. Access the Keystone Key login screen. Select Login button on the homepage to access the Keystone Key login page. Login. Enter the username and email issued temporary password to log into the system. Create a new password. When a user logs in for the first time, the system will prompt the user to create and set a new password. The password must be at least 8 characters long, contain at least one number, one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, and one special character, not include the first or last name of the registrant, not have been used in the last 10 Keystone ID passwords. Log in to system using new password. Select Close Window button. The Keystone ID page will launch. Use your new password to log in. Access the Child Welfare Portal. The user may log in immediately or return to the Child Welfare Portal to log in at any time. From the Child Welfare Portal, select the Login button. Log in with new ID. The Keystone Key page will launch. Enter your login credentials with the newly created password. If you try to log in incorrectly 5 times, you will be locked out and need to either reset your password or wait 30 minutes. To report suspected child abuse, choose Access My Referrals. The page provides the user the ability to select the account they would like to log into. Access My Clearances or Access My Referrals. Select Access My Referrals to report suspected child abuse. Learn more. The user is then taken to the Learn More pages. Learn More supplies with general information about the Child Welfare Portal and the Child Abuse Referral Process, ways to report, who may use the self-service or system to make a referral, who is a mandated reporter based on CPSL definition. Referral account overview. When users select Continue, they access the referral account overview page, where they may create a new referral, view their previous referrals, edit or delete a previously saved non-submitted referral, manage their organization information. Manage organization profile. Select Manage My Organization to access the Manage Organization profile. Note: you must update your organization information annually. The system will verify when the last update took place. If information has not been reviewed or updated in the past year, the user will be asked to confirm it's up to date upon login. List of organizations. The Manage Organization Profile page allows reporters to create a list of the organizations on whose behalf they submitted referrals. The list of organizations will then be available for the reporter to select from when submitting a referral. The reporter is required to select an organization before a referral can be submitted. Organization details. Select Add Organization from the previous screen to enter organization details for each organization with which the user is associated. Getting started, preparing for the referral process. The Getting Started page will display when you create a referral from the referral account overview page. This page provides a general overview to prepare the reporter for the abuse referral process. Mandated reporters. After getting started page, a page will display that defines a mandated reporter. Mandated reporters are required to indicate that they understand and acknowledge the role of a mandated reporter. Report through the Child Welfare Portal, making a referral. Slide navigation controls. Slide navigation buttons are available to the reporter throughout the entire referral. Select these buttons from any screen to navigate between pages quickly. Note: the pages are activated in a sequential manner, hence they will only be accessible for navigation once the page has been visited. Making a referral. Reporter details. The reporter details page captures basic information about the reporter. Reporters record how they came to know of the abuse. If this happened through a third party, the reporter will be prompted to provide additional information about the reporting source. The answers provided on this page will determine the remaining pages that the reporter must complete for this referral. 9. How to submit a referral through the Child Welfare Portal. Adding contact numbers. Anytime a user chooses Add Contact Number, a contact information box will open. Record contact information in the box, then select Save. Alleged Victim Details. The Alleged Victim Details page captures basic information about the alleged victim. Note: if a full name is not known, the user may enter what is known, but must click the Full Name Unknown checkbox. Parent Guardian Details. The Parent Guardian Details page captures basic information about the alleged victim's parents, guardians. Reporters can indicate if a parent guardian is one of the alleged perpetrators. Select plus Add Parent Guardian to bring up a new details page. The information will then be displayed in the grid format. Household Member Details. The Household Member Details page captures basic information about the alleged victim's parents, guardians. Reporters can indicate if a household member is an alleged perpetrator. Other Person's Responsible Details. The Other Person's Responsible Details page captures basic information about other individuals responsible for the welfare and safety of the child. Reporters can indicate if anyone identified as an alleged perpetrator.
Alleged perpetrator details. The alleged perpetrator details page captures basic information about the alleged perpetrator. Reporters can include multiple perpetrators. If an individual has already been indicated as an alleged perpetrator, that individual's information will pre-populate later on the perpetrator screen. Alleged abuse details. Reporters enter details about the alleged abuse on this page. Information entered includes specifying where the signs of abuse were viewable via an interactive body diagram. Interactive body diagram. The interactive body diagram allows the user to select the location on the body where the injury occurred, or to select from a drop-down menu. The user also specifies the injury type and the alleged perpetrator who caused the injury. Safety concerns. On the safety concerns page, the reporter answers questions about alleged victim safety. Actions taken. The actions taken page displays a list of any actions already taken to ensure the immediate health and safety of the alleged victim. Additional information. The additional information page gives the reporter the option to enter any data not already captured on the previous screen. Referral summary. The referral summary page summarizes all information captured on the referral. A user may edit each section of the application prior to submission. Note, selecting edit takes the user to the page where the information was originally entered. The user may then navigate back to this page to continue with their review. On the e-signature page, a reporter electronically signs the abuse referral immediately prior to submitting. Once the user has made any necessary edits and signed the referral, selecting the Submit Referral button will finalize the referral. After selecting Submit Referral on the e-signature page, the reporter has the option to create a copy of the referral for another alleged victim in the same household. Select Copy and Submit will create a new referral pre-populated with basic information of the original referral. The report has then the ability to continue this referral for 6 months from the date it's created. If not submitted after 6 months, it will be purged from the referral account overview. Submission confirmation. Once the user selects Copy and Submit or Do Not Copy and Submit, the referral is sent to Childline for processing. The system displays a submission confirmation, a confirmation by DHS of the receipt of a report of suspected child abuse submitted electronically shall receive the person making the report of making an additional oral/verbal or written report of suspected child abuse subject to Section 6313. Reporters may also receive one or more system-generated emails, submission confirmation email. This email is sent to the reporter once the referral has been received by the worker portal confirming a successful submission. Referral county update notification email. This email notifies the reporter that the region county assignment for a submitted referral has been updated in their child welfare account. Thank you. You have completed Section 9. Section 10. You have almost completed Recognizing and Reporting Child Abuse, Mandated and Permissive Reporting in Pennsylvania. Please continue through the course evaluation and integrity statement page to receive your certification of completion.